At Method Learning, our college prep experts are here to guide your student every step of the way. From boosting ACT SAT scores with proven test prep strategies to navigating the complex world of college admissions and to maximizing financial aid and scholarships, we provide the expertise your family needs for success. Join us as we talk to our Method Learning experts to provide you the insights into how your student can excel through the college process.
Hello, and welcome to the next installment of Meet Your College Admissions Expert. We have with us today Blair Dean. Blair, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, Brian? Good to be here.
Doing great, thanks. Yeah, thanks for being with us. So, Blair, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Give your background, your education, your credentials. Tell us about what you've been up to the last few years.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Blair Dean, one of the college advisors at Method Learning. And so my background actually, I started in college admissions in college while I was in college at the University of Georgia, if you can believe it. It was a long time ago. I might not give you the date. But I did an internship in admissions there. And I loved it so much that that kind of like set my path for what I have done for the last 20 years. And so as I got more and more interested in learning more about the policy and the process in higher education, I went on to do my master's degree in education at Harvard. So there I studied a lot of just kind of the back end, process and policy things of higher education, which was really interesting. And honestly, this has really been my passion ever since, helping students, helping particularly high school students figure out, what are their goals, where do they want to attend college, what's going to be the right fit for them, how do they attain those goals, what kind of careers do they want to have, just really the whole process walking through with families. I am currently in Nashville, Tennessee, but I have lived all over the country. So grew up in Illinois and have lived in many, many different places. So my students tend to be from all over the country, coast to coast. So I've worked with students from everywhere and have a good grasp and understanding of lots of different colleges and programs everywhere. You kind of build up all that information over 20 years. So got a good database in my head of really good fits for everyone. So yeah, and the last couple years I've been doing, mostly independent college advising and then also advising with Method Learning. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
me.
awesome. That certainly covers my next question, which was going to be what led you to pursue a career in college advising.
So I jumped
So
ahead.
that's covered. Yeah. So let's talk about your approach a little bit. How do you help students find the right college fit? What's important in that?
Yeah. So, the first thing that I always tell my students is that it's so important to, even starting early on in your high school career, to reflect, right? Like what kind of, everybody has this idea in their head of the name brand college, right? Like this is the college that I know and I love, or this is where my parents went to school and this is where I want to go. But you have to really do some reflection and some research and figure out where are you actually going to thrive, So
Mhm.
that to me is a huge part of it. What type of learning environment do you like? How do you learn best? Do you think you could handle a huge lecture hall, right? Like at a big university, or would you be better off at a smaller class? You have to really think through all of these things to figure out what's a good fit. And I say, keeping an open mind is important because that may look different than what you initially thought. So my process with students is always, I call it a college list building session where we really spend our whole meeting just doing that, just talking about everything from location and weather and how far do you think you can handle being away from home? Do you love that idea? Do you not?
Mhm.
What kind of careers are you interested in? What kind of learning environment? What else do you want access to, right? Some students love being in a city and being in like an urban environment where the city is really their campus, whereas some students really love being like in more of a suburban type area where it's quieter and you've got the college campus, kind of the quintessential college campus, right? So it's really individualized, but like I said, I guess my biggest thing is just always keep an open mind. And I like to provide my students, after we have this discussion, with a list of places they can research that kind of combines like what they have already shared with me and then my ideas for them, the places that they may not have thought of to look at. And then we keep going from there throughout our process until we get a really good solid list of where they're going to apply to in their senior year.
Great. And then once you've identified those schools, what's your approach with the students when it comes to balancing academic, extracurricular, and then personal factors in their application?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that is very individual to every single student, you know. So I think that there's so many different factors that go into that depending on the type of school that you're applying to, like what's the competitiveness of it. Um, the every student has a story to tell, so where are your strengths in that story is going to be really important, you know. So your specific extracurriculars and academics and the things that you want to highlight are going to be individual to the student, but also depending on where you're applying, like what do we want to highlight, you know. So I think that that is typically my approach is just very individual, and let's try to figure out, I often will have my students do research on specific colleges and like what's the mission and vision. Every college has a mission and vision, every college has a strategic plan. Like where do your own values and the things that you like line up with that? So how do we highlight that, in a way that really sets you up well for that particular college? So yeah, so it's really individualized. I mean, I think, what students participate in and where their strengths are. So we're trying to really build your story and figure out, what we pull out of that we want to highlight. So I would say that that's really the way to balance that for me.
Yeah, I think the your story is one of those things that comes up quite a bit throughout the college
Yeah.
admissions process in the space. So, yeah, that's really interesting. And what about, and this could open a big can of worms, but what current trend in college admissions uh, is going on right now that you think students and parents both need to really be aware of right now?
Yeah, I'm sure that this is the common answer right now, but testing, it's just testing is back. It really is. And I think that that is absolutely a trend we're seeing. I think that this year's seniors, especially, we're seeing a lot more deferrals of students who applied test optional. I think a lot more students who um, I think a lot more colleges, excuse me, are really putting that emphasis back on testing. I think it's a way for them to, they get so many applications now. Applications have continued to rise
Mhm.
like exponentially every year. So I think for colleges, it feels like a way for them to, once you get down to these like sort of nitty gritty, like, is it a way to differentiate between students? So I think we're really seeing that, and we're going to see what the data says after this year's class goes through it. But that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, there's been a lot of movement in that space, and I'm not sure that everybody's clear yet what that means per school, and each school treats it
No.
differently. So it's tricky waters to navigate for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I feel like also it seems anyway, again, this year's class I think is kind of an interesting one because sort of post COVID, this feels like the first year that schools are going back to saying like, okay, we're going to require tests. We're going to like look for different things. So I think this year's class will be interesting once we see how it all shapes up. But I also feel like we're seeing an uptick in applications to public universities and colleges. So I think a lot of the public universities are getting a lot more competitive, particularly for out of state students.
Mm.
I'm seeing that a lot more. So I think that it's interesting. It's like students are, still applying in high numbers to the same schools that you would imagine, right? But they're really expanding that out to a lot of different public universities all over the country as well. So I think to me, like I'm definitely seeing that as a trend, like a lot more students from all over the country applying to public universities not in their own state, like other elsewhere. So that's something else that I would definitely say that I'm seeing right now.
Well, I'm glad we've got this recorded in digital form because it'll be interesting to come back and revisit that same
Yeah,
question in future years, right? And see where
right.
that's gone.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I'm interested to see what happens, once we get all the numbers in from this class of 2025 too, and just really see how everything shapes up.
Yeah. So, can you share any stories about an individual student who's like achieved their college goals with your help?
Yeah, so I would say this. So the one that comes to mind for me is actually a current student of mine that I feel this is, he's been on this journey where he has had this one college in mind, forever. Like this has just been like his dream school, right? And um, he has very high, if you want to talk about just like numbers wise, right? Like he's a very good applicant to these sort of highly selective type of schools, right? But now this is going to sound maybe not like a success story, so you have to wait with me till the end, right? He applied early decision to one of these Ivy Plus type schools, right? Did not get admitted, which we're seeing obviously a lot of these colleges have like 3, 4, 5% admit rates, right?
Mhm.
So it's not a reflection of him. It's not a reflection of necessarily as he qualified. It's just they get so many applications, right, that it becomes more and more difficult. But the flip side of that is that we had made a great list for him that was very balanced. We had taken the pieces of what he loves about that particular college that was his dream school, and we figured out a list of places that he would have a very similar experience, maybe even a better experience, right? Depending on like what he wanted to do. So all that to be said, he ended up getting a full ride to a public university, not in his state, out of state, a public university where he got admitted into the honors college, and he's getting a full ride to go to that school. And he visited recently and absolutely loves it. Like feels like this is going to be an incredible choice for him. He's someone who is wanting to go into medical school, so graduating without any debt is huge. Like so, it's just interesting. I say this as a success story because I think that sometimes we have an idea of success being, the one college that we're all like thinking of and dreaming about. And sometimes that doesn't work out, but that's okay because a lot of times because we've gone through this process and done this, this process of finding all these great fits, like you may end up somewhere actually that it ends up being an even better fit where financially and otherwise for you and your family and for your goals and everything like that. So I use that as a success story because I think that that is something I'm really excited for him, and he's very excited about it as well. So a little bit of a different success story, but that's kind of our goal, figuring
Well,
out ways to drive.
yeah, well, I think that's certainly a trend that people are waking up to these days too. When the stakes at play are so high, um, to come out with so much debt and then go on to graduate school or medical school,
Yeah.
whatever it is, and then have even more debt piled on top of it, it's not always the best outcome for people and their families. And I think that that's one of those things that people are really, really starting to understand.
Yeah.
That could be a much better outcome where he gets the full ride, goes to the honors college, thrives in that environment, and then is able to go to a top school for medical school and do really well. And yeah, that has a huge impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm really excited for him for that.
Awesome. Well, Blair, thank you so much for being with us. This was a really interesting conversation, and I want to tell everybody, families like what they heard from Blair, and if they'd like more information about how to work with her or one of our other college advisors, please go to www.methodlearning.com and book a free consultation today. Blair, this was great. Thank you so much for being
Yeah,
with
thank
us.
you. This is great. Nice to see everybody.